The following is a JourneyWise Network production.
Hey friends, I want to welcome you to the You Matter podcast. I'm Shane Stanford. Why you matter? This has been a phrase that we've used in my house for a long time. It came from the motto that I was using in the church that we had the privilege of founding. And at the end of every service, we would say, "What is our motto?" And everybody would say back, "Be salt and light." And I would say, "You matter." And the reason that I did that is because I have always been someone who's been at war with time, and trying to find the things that really matter are very important to me. For those of you who don't know, I was born a hemophiliac, which means that I don't clot and I don't heal very well. And because of blood transfusions, I contracted HIV and hepatitis C. Medicines used to treat them caused me to have heart surgery at the age of 36. I lost my right eye. Literally, they had to remove it a couple of years ago because of hemorrhaging. And I've also gone through liver treatments that for 108 weeks, I was involved in a chemotherapy type class drug, and am thankful that I'm cured, but it was still a very difficult 108 weeks. And so when I say that I'm at war with time, I'm not just using that as a phrase. From the time that I turned 16 and found out my HIV status, this was way back in the days when there were no medicines, not even AZT. And I was told that I had maybe a couple of years based on how long I'd had the disease. And so as new medicines would come out, as new treatments would come out, I would strive even more. I would put my ambition to work and try to do as much as I possibly can. And I've had a wonderful life. I've been pastor of two amazing churches after the church I founded. The church I founded is sort of like my child. I love that church. I still love those people. They mean so much to me. But the first church to which I was sent did not take me because of my HIV status. And that was a difficult blow for the very fact that I felt that I was called. And our denomination, I'm a United Methodist, had trouble ordaining me. At the time, of course, HIV and AIDS was a very, very scary conversation. And it took them a little while. And that just heightened my sense of wanting to make every moment count. And it's such an important part of who I am. Now, I got the phrase from my grandfather. My grandfather, when he found out my HIV status, sat down with me after playing a round of golf, and he said, he didn't name it, but he said, "What are you going to do with this thing?" Talking about HIV and Hep C. And I said, "I don't know. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it." And my grandfather said, "If you want to feel sorry for yourself, I love you so much, I'll get in the corner and cry with you." But he said, "I think you can make every day matter, and you can make every day count." And those words echoed so deep into my heart and into my life and have meant so much to me. And I have tried as a father, as a husband, and as a pastor to make every day count. But that's not easy because, we have an adversary who's working against us in very real ways, trying to push us off course, trying to make us vulnerable and fragile, trying to take our spirit away from us. And I've had that happen so many times. When I had heart surgery, right after that, we lost our insurance because that was at the time when health insurance had maximums, and I maxed out the insurance. I was literally getting medicine, and the nurse had to come in and take the needle out of my arm because we had run out of money and they had been informed, and it's a very expensive drug. And so I started having panic attacks right after heart surgery, which, by the way, is not good for people who've had heart surgery to have panic attacks. That is not a good thing. And those panic attacks stayed with me for years and years, and they would especially come up when I would preach on Sunday mornings. And at one time, I was preaching 4 services on a Sunday morning, and I would have to change clothes after every service just because I would be sweating so bad because of the panic attacks. Part of the reason I was having those panic attacks is because I was still under the impression that I had to earn the respect and had to earn the promise that people had put on me. After I'd been ordained, and I went up to the guy that was over our pension fund. He was an old grumpy guy. And I said, I just want to thank you guys for taking a chance on me. I was maybe 25 years old. And he looked at me and he said, just don't die. It would cost us a fortune to support your wife from now on. Sometimes the people in the church can be very hard and very difficult. And I've told people over the years of being a pastor, but also being someone who struggles with health issues, I've had times where I've lost faith, not in God, but in God's people because of the way they respond. But still, the balance, the tension of how do you make every day matter while at the same time being faithful to keeping yourself healthy and keeping your life balanced. And it took me a long time, friends, I'll tell you, to be able to get to this point. In fact, it's only been in the last few years that I have found real balance in that, because still there's that inner voice inside of me saying, you've got to do it because, and then just fill in the blank. And that is really not what mattering to where God has planted you means. God doesn't want to send you into a place that you then overdo to the point or get out of whack or out of balance to the point that it becomes harmful to you. That is not the spirit and the intention of our God. I don't want you to listen to these podcasts simply to pass the time or to get great information. I want you to really consider what it means to matter where God has placed you. Some of you have been placed in great positions of importance to the world, and people look upon that, and lots of people rely on you. One of our episodes is with a bank CEO, an $80 billion bank that has tens of thousands of employees, and he talks about going to bed at night, and on his mind, he knows these people are counting on him to make good decisions. But the thing that's so beautiful about asking that question in your life is because we get a sense of that from Paul's letters. In 1 Corinthians 15:58, it is a wonderful verse where Paul, at the end of his first letter to Corinth, says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, be strong and steady, always enthusiastic, knowing that everything you do for God is useful. There's one very contemporary translation that says that everything you do for God matters, and I love that. But the context of this is something we really ought to take note of. The first letter to Corinth, Paul is talking about some struggles that he's heard in places where they are not doing well. And because of that, he scolds them sometimes, he instructs them, he encourages them, and some of it gets pretty testy. But in that last chapter, he comes back and says, look, and he begins by saying, dear brothers and sisters, they are family. They're not just, people that have been brought along for a particular issue. They're family. And, most of us matter first in our families. We should matter first in our homes. And I want you to ask the question today, do you matter in the place where you are sent in terms of your family and relationships? Or are you distant and cut off? And then Paul goes on to say, be strong and steady. To be strong and steady, that illustration is to give your all and to have a direction, have purpose. I love what Albert Einstein said. He says, if you want to have a happy life, have a goal. And what he meant by that was, there's also a paraphrase of that where someone says, if you want a happy life, don't count on other people, count on the goals that make your relationships better. And there's all kinds of variations. But what Einstein meant about that is, purpose and direction and our destinations count, because that is what we should be working so hard for. Not being at war with time, not trying to prove yourself to someone, because most of that is futile and cannot work. And we hear that a lot in these episodes during this season, that the most important thing to do is find the steadiness in your life. Don't become wishy-washy. Don't become undone. Don't become unsettled by either internal or external forces. Don't self-medicate, which a lot of folks talk about in terms of when things get hard, they'll start drinking a little more, possibly doing other things to self-medicate. That's not the cure. That's just simply a bandage that will come ripping off, probably in one of the most important and unfortunate times. And so, dear brothers and sisters, be strong and steady. But I love this third part. He says, always enthusiastic. Friends, I want to tell you, it doesn't matter where you think you matter. If you don't have joy in terms of where you matter, then you don't matter much there, because joy is such an essence of believing and following Jesus. He wants us to be enthusiastic. Paul's telling Corinth, who've just gotten in so much trouble, he says, but be enthusiastic, have joy in what you're doing, and have a sense of your presence, of God's presence in that place. We have 3 daughters, and they're 3 very different personalities. My oldest daughter was sort of I'll just call it, she was the princess. We spent a lot of time and spoiled her because she was the first. Our middle daughter, who is absolutely brilliant and just a total strong young woman, who is a labor and delivery nurse now, she used to get frustrated with Sissy, that's what she called the oldest one, because Sissy wouldn't play the games that she wanted to play. And so Juliana would get a little mischievous and maybe take a toy from her sister and hide it. And they would fuss back and forth. And so one of the things we would do when they would get to fussing or had an altercation is we would make them hold hands and pray for each other. And Sarah Grace, the oldest, prayed this beautiful little prayer. And by the way, Sarah Grace could also manipulate the situation. She would be the first to tell you that. See, she had a back door by which she could create some issues. But Juliana, while she was holding Sissy's hands that morning, said, I don't want to pray for her, because if I pray for her, that means I have to like her. And I've always loved that conversation because it was so true. It was so raw. And one of the ways that God tells us if we're in the right place is, does it bring you joy? And I've been in some appointments that clearly did not bring me joy, and I had to do something about that. My wife and family and I had some difficulty at our church in Florida, and I was just under so much pressure and feeling so much anxiety about all of that. And of course, I told you earlier that I'd started the anxiety attacks. And so I was dealing with that. And one day I just came to my wife and I said, we're just going to have to ask the Lord for something new, because I can't find joy here. And friends, it wasn't just a few weeks that I got a call from someone about an appointment in Memphis, Tennessee that we eventually took, Christ Church, Memphis, which really saved my life in so many ways, just because I was able to find joy again in ministry. I say that to you to ask yourself, in the place where you are now, do you have joy? Do you have an experience that fills you up? I used to tell people when I was pastoring, when we would go to find volunteers for children's ministries or for other ministries, I would say, we want people who are passionate about this issue, because passionate people give their all. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time reassuring them, and they keep doing the job. They don't give up. And I remember we needed a teacher for the 5th grade boys Sunday school class. And our 5th grade boys at the church where we founded have all turned out to be wonderful young men. They've grown up and are doing a great job. But boy, they were just a handful back in those days, and they could not keep a teacher. And a doctor in the local community, after I had basically said, if we don't get someone to teach these kids, they're going to go down the wrong track and, end up doing drugs and may end up in jail. I mean, I kind of sold the whole package. And this guy came to me and said, look, I don't want them doing that. I want to help. So let me teach the class. And I said, but this is not a passion area for you. And he said, but it has to be done. And so it took about 3 weeks before I could tell that he was at the end of his rope. And one of the little kids had heard me say what I did about, if you don't have a teacher, what they're going to do. And he came to me and said, one little 5th grader said, Pastor Shane, I think I'd rather go to jail than have Mr. So-and-so teach us anymore. There just wasn't any joy there. And we did eventually find a great teacher for that class. But joy is the crossroads by which where we're going means the most. And that's why it's so important to find joy in where you are today. But then it's those 3 coming together, that last part of 1 Corinthians 15:58, everything you do for God means something. Everything you do for God matters. When you're doing it in His name, when you're doing it in His Word, and the Word, by the way, friends, the Scripture, those are the guardrails by which you're able to move forward in terms of the dynamics of where God plants you. And what I mean by that is that I have been in great appointments, and even in great appointments, though, God has set boundaries, parameters, where He said, nope, you don't need to go that direction. You don't need to get involved with that. You don't need to respond that way, reminding me of the importance of being a person who is listening to Him first and then moving forward into wherever He's placed us. Right now, let me ask this question. In your family, if you're a mom or if you're a husband, a father, do you matter, and are you making a difference in your family's life in the name of Jesus? Can you name ways that you're doing that? Let's take the circle out a little bit. Are you able to do that in your church or in your small group or in your community? Let's take it further out. Are you able to do that in your workplace? The word everything means, this is a shocker, it means everything, and it also means everywhere. Jesus, when He calls the disciples to go and make disciples in Matthew 28, He says, go into the world, and He uses the present imperative in the Greek language, that tense, and that tense means as you go. And it's a command as you go into the world, as you go with your family, as you go to church, as you go to, baseball games, as you go to work. Make disciples. He was so clear about the fact that great discipleship matters. It changes the world, but it also has the impact of being at every level and essence of your life. And so I'm so excited that you're going to be with us over this journey these next few weeks in this season. This podcast asks people who are in very significant roles that matter, how do you matter? And how have you mattered where God has placed you? We've got a great season coming up for You Matter podcast. I'm going to be interviewing my childhood hero, Johnny Bench, who I think is the greatest catcher in the history of Major League Baseball. And we talk a lot about baseball on that episode, but we also talk about the places where he was, where being so young and so many people and organizations were relying on him, how did he balance what it meant to play hard and give his all, and at the same time have some sense of peace and finding some sense of rest? And it's a great, great episode. We also talked to Laurie Beth Jones, who's the author of the bestseller Jesus CEO, and she gives us some great insight into going into businesses. She started out as a marketing and business executive consultant, and she would go into these businesses and she would meet these CEOs who were basically, masters of the universe, and yet they were about to come undone because they had not found a real sense of what their place was where they mattered at that moment, and they didn't understand it, and therefore they simply were at war again with time. We can all be at war with time. That is true. And then we have a great episode with Ben Nern, who is the executive producer of the movie Greyhound, starring Tom Hanks. Ben is a Memphis guy. He's got now an office in Los Angeles. And we talked a lot about the film industry and a lot about entertainment, but Ben's got an amazing testimony, and he has found great balance in his life, and he knows where he matters most. And then I'll just tell you about one more that I thought was wonderful, and that was with Robert St. John. Robert is a friend. He's also owns multiple restaurants. He's a chef. He's an author. He's been on the Food Network. Just an amazing guy. And he tells about being 25 years sober. In fact, he showed me the medallion, and he said he remembers when he came to that impression in his life where he said, I'm going to die early because of my alcohol use. And he decided to turn over a new leaf because he wanted to matter down the road. He wanted to make every day matter. And he's basically transformed the food situation in Mississippi, because he started a ministry that now services what we would consider a mission center in every single county of Mississippi. Isn't that amazing? And so just the power of what his testimony means. And so we've got some great guests this year that I think you're going to love. I want you to go to our website at JourneyWise.network. You can learn more about who we are and about our other two programs that we're so excited about, which are called JourneyWise with Dr. Ronnie Kent and James Kent and myself, and then also Choosing Cheer with Nicolette Bell. We also have some great resources available for you. We have several books that are coming out, and then a new learning platform called Servant School. So it is very much a faith-based master class type, where experts in all kinds of areas, from biblical studies to leadership to formation, are teaching you in very brain-friendly classes about each of those items. And so I encourage you again to go to JourneyWise.network. And if you want to know more about who I am, go to ShaneStanford.com. That's ShaneStanford.com. You'll be able to see more about this podcast and about the work that I'm doing as the executive director of the Moore West Center for Applied Theology. And of course, also you'll be able to see other resources. Friends, I love you. I love you because God loves you. And I know sometimes that you may feel like that you're not enough. And guess what? You're not enough. I'm not enough. But I know the one who is. And just as he tells us in Matthew 5:13 through 16, we get to be salt and light. So my prayer for all of us during this season is that we will go into the world and be salt and light. Because guess what? You matter. God bless you. Friends, I want to thank you for joining us today on this episode of the You Matter podcast. You Matter podcast is a ministry of the JourneyWise Podcast Network, and we want you to go to our website at JourneyWise.network, that's JourneyWise.network, and learn more about this podcast, about all the podcasts that we host on our network, and about the resources that we've created to help you on your journey with Jesus. We're so thankful that you are listening to all that God is working and doing, and we want to encourage you to not only subscribe to this podcast, but take time to give us 5 stars and write us a review. And of course, we encourage you to forward this, to share it with someone that you think might be interested in today's conversation. We love you. More importantly, God loves you. Go into the world and be salt and light. Remember, you matter. God bless you.